Hey, Bat family. You already know who this is. This is your sister and your friend, Nkiru, of Conversations from the Diaspora, a Building Africa's Future podcast. And I wanted to briefly interrupt your listening for a few moments just to tell you about Anchor. So if you're like me, you've been listening to podcasts for a while, and maybe you thought to yourself that I might want to try this. Listen to me. Go ahead and start your podcast. And it's really easy with Anchor. It's free, and you don't need all the fancy equipment. You can just use your phone or your computer. Pretty easy, right? I think so. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, that is Anchor, ANCHOR.FM to get started. See you soon. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. As usual, I'm your host, your sister and your friend Nkiru. And tonight I'm joined by the lovely Chinwe Ononuju of Auntie Chi's Igbo class. You might remember her from our previous relationship panel discussion because she dropped lots of bombs at the end. She is an educator, an author, an interpreter with a background in linguistics. Her love for teaching Igbo language to her nieces and nephews abroad led her to writing a book, Muta Asusu Igbo, and designing an Igbo class to teach Igbo learners in the diaspora. Chi, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, would you like to say a few words to our listeners?
Hi, hello everyone. We've been planning. I've been hoping to be invited to this discussion for a very long time because I just love this conversations and. I've actually listened in a couple of times and I've actually learned a lot. And I do hope that anyone listening will learn a thing or two from our conversation today and, laugh. I'm all about laughing.
Yes.
And well, everyone, welcome. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for tuning in. That is, when you get to listen.
Yes. Thank you, Chi. So like you said, I just really wanted to continue our conversation from where we left off from our Sabi Sunday, which was last year, actually. We were talking about my experience growing up as a Nigerian American, specifically in an Igbo household. And just as you and I have discussed on a number of occasions, and as we've been seeing on social media, being African is now considered cool. Like it's the in thing. Everyone has this like renewed pride or sense of like self and love for our African upbringing. But for many of us growing up here, it wasn't always this way essentially. But it is nice to see how things are changing. We're seeing this through people reclaiming their traditional names, those people who are willingly traveling back home. And the reason why I say willingly is because for many of us growing up, traveling or being sent back home rather was used as a threat or bad behavior for some reason. So to see people wanting to go back to their home countries and invest in them as well, I think that's a very beautiful thing. So Chi, just to kind of jump straight into the conversation, what would you say, or whom would you say is responsible for this cultural revitalization of African culture among millennials in the diaspora? And specifically, just for the sake of this conversation, among the Igbos?
Well, I would think that's a very relevant question. I would think the millennials I would give it up to them because, like you said, I think they have made African. I think the thing that we have learned with this generation is that we're beginning to understand, or I think if any generation made being African cool, I would think that it is this generation. I believe that our fathers and our grandfathers, talking about parents of the millennials, I would think that there was still struggles, that came from, maybe especially for those in diaspora, especially with relocating, and they were faced with other struggles like being new in new being new in another land, and being being wanting to just break. They had a lot of glass ceilings that they needed to shatter. So I feel like I would also give it up for the parents of the millennial, because they also paved the way to make the millennials comfortable, and so at the point, they got comfortable to be like, okay, you know what, I think they got to, I mean, those ones, their parents came here, they already knew where they were from, but they came into a society that where they were trying to find their feet. So it was like, okay, I'm here, I have to break glass ceilings in this society, I have to succeed in this society. And so there were so many things that were put in the back burner. And when they gave birth to these kids, and these millennials started wondering, okay, now we're here, where do we come from? And even though we're born here, it's not like everybody is accepting us as, I mean, there's a lot of struggle going on with where you're from. So if you're a child of an immigrant, even though you're, let's say you're born in America, even though you're American, you still have a lot of struggles as to identity. You are an American, and of course your parents do not say you are an American, no matter how much much education you've gathered, they still say you're Nigerian. So at a point, as you grow older, really, you start to want to know more about yourself. You try to know more of who you are, and this gave birth to wanting to say, okay, you know what, I'm actually from here. And the more mature you get, you begin to understand that there's nothing wrong with where you're from, even though I've heard a lot of stories of people who grew up out here, who were bullied because of maybe the texture of their hair, the way they looked, their language, or how their parents spoke. But you start to understand that there's nothing here. You start to understand that there's nothing wrong with where you come from, and the best thing for you to do is to embrace it, because no other person is going to embrace you and accept you better than when you accept yourself and accept where you come from. So I think all this contributed to the fact, contributed to the reason why the millennials said, okay, you know what, it is cool to be African. Our parents came out here, they wanted to succeed, and somehow they didn't really expose us, they didn't really give us the necessary exposure to the culture. But what we're going to do is we're going to succeed, and also at the same time find who we are and know who we are, and hold on to our identity. So I believe this is what has happened, and embracing yourself, when not just as it relates to culture, but when you start to love yourself and embrace yourself, it's actually a cool thing. You become a really cool person, because it is the confidence of knowing who you are and accepting who you are that actually makes you really, really cool. So I think I think that's because I'm a cool person.
Yes, very cool.
I thought I should.
You actually brought up a lot of good points, because I know, for me personally, and like you said, a lot of our parents, their main focus was for their kids to be in an environment where there are more opportunities, where they can have access to different things that maybe they weren't, or that they wouldn't be exposed to in their home countries. So sometimes I think the emphasis on culture, maybe growing up, wasn't as strong, because I remember being in class, for example, let's say Christmas time or even Thanksgiving, which is coming up, people would ask, okay, what are you doing, or what are you guys going to eat? Or sometimes it's made for awkward conversations, because it's first of all, if I tell you what I'm going to eat, you won't even know what it is. You won't. Yeah. You'll find it as disgusting, and I don't have the time or energy to want to explain to you. That I'm eating. So it's a very good point that you brought up. Yeah. But I think on the other hand too, I think growing up also we would always hear things like, let's say we go to a function, like a party or something, and one of our community elders are, they're trying to communicate with us in Igbo, for example, and we respond in English. Then they look at us like, oh, these American kids, they don't know their language. But the funny thing is, they're the ones who are not making the attempt to really teach
Yes.
or immerse their kids in the culture. I mean, like I always say, my parents, they, despite the fact that, Igbo is not very forthcoming for me when I'm trying to, like, this conversation that you and I are having, I'm not at a place where I can have it in a fluent, that would be very amazing when I can finally get to that level. But like if my mom, for example, was speaking to me in Igbo in the same kind of context, I would be able to, completely understand her. But I think for people who are younger than me, and some other people maybe my same age group who maybe kind of grew up in a different home, some of them, they really have no command or understanding of their language at all, or even some parts of their culture. So, I know that's one thing that you and I, we talk about often, like this failure, I guess, of African parents raising their children in the diaspora to teach them their native tongues and teach them about their heritage, and in the same way or as reasonably as possible as maybe that they were exposed to it when they were younger. So I would like to ask you, how can African millennials, both those in the diaspora and those on the continent who are parents or thinking of becoming parents, how can they do a better job in encouraging the next generation as it relates to teaching them about their culture, cultural heritage? And in addition to that, who would you say is responsible for maintaining culture in the Igbo context, both in the past and in the present?
Okay. Yeah. So just because our tradition and culture is, the one that, it's actually a bit challenging to find so many history books about the Igbos. There are always, like, whenever you go out to look for books or resources on the history of Igbo people, there are so many tales. Not, I won't call it tales. There are so many perspectives. There's so many points of view. Now, the thing is, again, back to the I feel like it has a lot to do. I mean, the millennials, I see millennials actually working really hard to do better than our parents did. Not that I'm judging our parents, they did a great job, but you have to understand that the way the African man, especially the one who came out from home, his mind is designed to want to succeed. So once he finds what he calls success, once he identifies what is success to him, he focuses on it, and every other thing is, kept aside. That's why when we were growing up, in fact, some of us did not have time for extracurricular activities. Like, I mean, out here in the US, you see, going to school, you have piano lessons, you have karate classes, you have swimming, all those kinds of things. I mean, if you take it back to some of the, let's say your generation, your parents,
right,
when you were growing up, I know some people in your age group, some parents didn't want their kids to participate in extracurricular activities. They just wanted you to study, because to them, what success looked like was either becoming a professional. In fact, there's a joke in Nigeria that says that for an African parent, there are only 4 careers you can choose from. You can choose from either being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Or the fourth option is you become a disgrace to the family. So even if you're an author, even if you're a business analyst, whatever it is, as long as it doesn't fall under the first 3 category, you are not really deemed as successful. So when our parents started, when our parents came and this was what success meant to them, they put everything and they pushed their kids, which actually works, but they didn't. I guess they because they wanted success and nothing less, they did not want to hear anything else. I can't even imagine when we were growing up, if I had said that I wanted to be an artist, or if I said I wanted to be a musician, I would have been looked as an unserious person. So because of that, things like language or learning about culture. I mean, the parents. I mean, your generation, your parents' generation didn't even have the time for that because they were also struggling to to be successful, and they needed to raise kids that needed to be successful as well. Yeah. I have a student who told me that when they were growing up, their parents said, "Listen, learning Igbo or learning the culture is going to confuse you. Just focus on becoming a doctor." But right now, millennials have actually achieved, and thanks to their parents for pushing so hard. I always say that your parents, the generation of your parents who moved out here and raised kids, did an awesome job. I mean, it is hard for you to come into any Nigerian community in the USA without finding at least one professional in that family. So the parents did a great job, and most of the immigrant kids, have done exceptionally well for themselves. It's impressive when I look back and see it. So having said that, because of the way they strive to push the kids, I realized that it seemed like they didn't have time for anything else. But now the millennials are like, okay, you know what? We can actually be successful and still have time because they are now in this society. They are now in this environment, and they know that all these curricular activities are also important for the general growth of any human being. So they are investing in some of them that have kids are investing in, my child is taking piano classes, they're taking swimming classes, they're doing all this kind of things, and they also understand that now if they have to pass down from generation to generation who they are, they can also introduce culture. And so you see organizations like Umibo Unite, and people are just joining the group. I was in the last gala that was the last national convention that was held in Houston. There were over 1,000 people in attendance, 1,000 Umibo people in attendance, and that was amazing for me. You understand, because people just they are now understanding that we can actually be successful, and because this is what they call the jet age, or the age of the age of technology. That's what I know some parents call it, the jet age. It's so funny when they say that. So but this is the age of the technology. So you can actually multitask. You can do so many things at the same time. You can be successful, learn about your culture, know about your culture, learn your language, and it doesn't even stop anything. The pressure is less. The pressure is less on the millennials, basically, so they can actually be successful and still have time for culture. So I think the millennials are they still it's still their responsibility to keep passing this, to keep teaching, trying. I see a lot of them. I have a lot of students all over the world that are Igbos. They have people in Australia, people in Norway, people in the UK, and they're learning Igbo language. And I feel like now that they have understood who they are and where they come from, I feel like it also depends on them to keep passing it along, because that's all we have. That's all we have. Yes, ours is an oral tradition, and passing it from generation to generation, and also trying to develop, because a lot of people are beginning to invest in resources that will keep the story alive, that will keep the culture alive, and that will educate people more. So I feel like the millennials need to keep doing more. Our parents have they have tried, and sure they are tired, but they also did a good job as well. But I also wanted to touch briefly on what you said about not encouraging people to like when you go for the Igbo parties and the fact that you cannot speak the Igbo language, people an uncle or an auntie start saying, no, you can't speak the language or whatever, not knowing that they didn't contribute to making it any better. So it still comes from that pressure. I feel like they were under a lot of pressure, that maybe a lot of pressure to succeed, that I don't know, somehow they magically thought that if they don't teach you Igbo, you can grow up and just because you're born in just because you are Igbo, and which is funny, because they forget the environment that you were raised in, and that's it. If you don't teach somebody a language, they are not going to learn, no matter. It's only your environment that will affect you to a large extent, you're learning a language to a large extent. It kind of reminds me of that situation where, I don't know, we would have grew up back home. When you are young, they tell you, oh, don't talk to any man, don't bring any man to the house, don't associate with men. And then all of a sudden, you are in your 30s, single, and then everybody's like, why are you not married? When was I supposed to find this man? Is it when you said I should not talk to men? How was I supposed to associate that time? It wasn't supposed to happen automatically, So right. It's really that kind of a thing. We're just the people of high expectations. That's the thing. And I think only great people have high expectations for themselves, Yeah,
I mean, that's very powerful, Chi. I mean, I definitely want to touch on a few things you just mentioned. Like, I would say when it comes to like you mentioned, I guess parents not really having time and everything else. I think the other thing too, some of them, they just didn't have the money as well, because, as you can imagine with the immigrant experience, for many of them, especially when you consider, their spouse or consider children, and then, you're in a foreign land trying to make it, like many times they weren't always home. I can speak for the experience of many of people that I know. You're around your siblings all the time, you're around your classmates, because parents are working different schedules, trying to make ends meet. So I definitely understand what you're saying, that language and all these other things wasn't like on their top of their priority list. It was mainly go to school, do what you need to do, and but I mean, that's definitely one thing I would say, is that our generation, we're trying to do differently, be more intentional, be more involved when it comes to things with your children or with the young people around you. And I think the other thing too that I wanted to mention, like as you mentioned with Umu Igbo Unite, and even with your Igbo language classes and everything, there's clearly a need for it, because if there wasn't a need for it, then you wouldn't see the type of support that you're getting, or excuse me, like maybe organizations like UIU is seeing. So there's a longing, there's been a longing for a long time, to have these resources, to have these organizations, especially that's ones that are driven by like young people versus, just like, I guess, the elders, because they do things different in a way than we do. And actually on I think a couple of weeks ago, I remember tagging you in this funny thing that I saw on Instagram. And there was one basketball player, I think his mom is possibly white, but his dad is an Igbo man. And he didn't know how, you remember? He didn't know how to pronounce his name correctly, which to me, I feel like that was incredibly shocking, because that's like one of the most basic, like, even if you don't know your language, at least like your name, like for him to be mispronouncing it, I was even thinking that he was making mockery of people who mispronounce his name, not knowing that he was the chief culprit. Yeah. And then I remember saying something like, didn't his parents or his dad teach him how to say his name correctly? And one person was saying, well, you can't blame the parents forever, which I guess to some extent that's true, because this man is clearly an adult now. So I guess to kind of bring it back to the main point, I'm saying now that we are adults, now that we're growing up, many of us, like I said, are even starting our own families now. It is our responsibility to learn the language, learn the culture, and find, I guess, this sense of community, which I know many people are doing. But I guess kind of to go to the next, or did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, well, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, it had it all, the parent, I feel like, as I mentioned earlier, your parents had more pressure than your generation. Because, I mean, in as much as they were here, they were working 2 jobs. Some people were working 3 jobs. Some of them were going to, they were paying bills. And people are home too. Because some of the parents who came out here, I like to call them the first or second generation immigrants.
Right. Yeah,
some of the people who came out here, they came out with the intention that they were just going to come here to greener pastures, go to an education, make money, and then retire back home.
Right.
Which is funny because I have not seen anybody who came and went back home
I know.
and just stayed back home. I have a couple of people. I know a couple of people who actually came out here and then went back home, but it's you always find them that they miss, because if it's not the security that they're complaining about, it's something else. However, so the parents that came out here and then they had to work, and then they also had to send money back home. So let's say a parent that back then was making $100 a month. Out of the $100, maybe $20 was going to go to his rent and the bills, and then $30 will go to maybe schools and taking care of his family, and then another $40 was going to go back to Nigeria. So, but these are some of the pressures that your generation isn't saddled with. Nobody is stressing you from back home to say, oh, Papa, this person is dead, or oh, there's going to be a burial. Oh, you have not even paid levy. I know that some people who live in the USA still pay burial levy or whatever levy back home. And there's nothing wrong with all this, but these are the things that actually added to the pressure that they faced, right? Because in as much as they were living out here, some of them, their minds didn't settle. So I still hear some people who say that, oh, listen, whenever I'm there, take me back home and go and bury me. I mean, you've lived all your life outside in the United States, you understand? But, so they still have that I'm going home, thing at the back of their mind, which actually didn't make them settle. There was a post that I saw a couple of days back that made so much sense to me, and it was thought-provoking. So somebody said that some of the, generation that came out here, and then some of them were living in 2 bedrooms with 5 children, but back home they built homes with 10 bedrooms, massive homes back home. And the funny thing is that they rarely visit home these days. They rarely visit home. Some of them visit home maybe once, tops twice a year, and that's it. But they basically lived here like this wasn't their home. They basically lived outside Nigeria like this wasn't their home. They're just passing through. And so some of them didn't really integrate into the society. Some of them just, all they did was work, go to school, raise kids, and that's it. And now they just don't know what to do, because when they even go home, they still feel like fish out of water. But your generation doesn't have that issue, all right? They are relaxed. All they know is the United States. This is their home. This is where they came from. They know this society better than their parents. They can, and that's why they're able to juggle a couple of things and just do it graciously and effortlessly. Because they are more relaxed. They now know that, look, I'm not going home any day. This is my home. So they try to get comfortable with where they are right now, despite whatever the parents say. So
wow. Yeah, I mean, I actually watched a video, I think earlier this month or last month, about what you just said, this idea of, building mansions back home that are literally abandoned, like some areas back in, the East, in Igbo land, that have so many like completed massive homes that are way bigger, way fancy, like very extravagant homes that, people who live in Hollywood, like that kind of level of homes. But like you said, like they'll be living like very modest, like simple lives here, like sometimes even struggling, but yet like they have this palace back home that they're not even like living in, and no one is living there. Like, so it's interesting actually. Well, this wasn't what I planned to ask you, but why would you say that is? Like, what's the motivation behind that?
Well, I think, it depends. Everybody has their reason, everybody has the reason that drives them to, to do what they do. And then sometimes you make all these plans and then circumstance say, hey,
right.
So some people came out here and, to find and catch the American dream and take it back home. And so they, like, as I said, they never settled. They always had the I'm going home mentality. And so they forgot everything else and just focused on, and Igbo people Africans are very focused. Once they identify something that they feel they need and they are focused on it, every other thing is by the way. Like, it doesn't make any sense to them. So I feel like it just came from that I am going home someday.
Yeah.
So let me lay up treasures back home where I'm gonna go and retire and then relax and live the life that I want to
Yeah.
live. Yeah. But then life is, there's nothing wrong with that. I think I know a couple of people who actually went back home and they have done well, even though I know that some of them miss. Half of the time they are out here in the United States, maybe
Yeah,
for
spending
whatever
their
reason.
time.
Exactly. But it's just, for me, I believe that your home is wherever you are. So if you're live for the now. There's so many people who actually gathered all this wealth and they didn't even live to enjoy it.
Wow.
So just I think like the millennials are just showing that generation that you can actually live here. But some people, some of the first, second generation immigrants that came didn't begin to buy homes until recently.
Yeah.
But it's rare for you to find any millennial whose priority once he gets a job is not to buy a home.
Right.
You understand? So basically, it's just about roots. So they didn't. Some of the generation. You can multitask, especially now that the world is a global village. You can actually multitask. But you just have to. I think it's just about planting your root. It's just all about planting your root. You have to plant your root where you are. There's nothing wrong with still doing your investments, building your home back home and all that, but you're not going to just deny yourself struggle and pass through all these things, just for what, really?
Right.
Just basically holding your breath on life. That's what I call it, holding your breath on life. Yeah, just saying, okay, you know what, I'm just going to keep struggling now so that I can enjoy later. What if later never comes?
It's true. It's a very powerful point, actually, Chi. Very, very true. And I think, just to kind of add to that, growing up again, all these experiences are from what I observed in my own personal family home, and then from conversations that I've had with other friends that are Nigerian or that are from Congo or from other places on the continent. I think many of us, because our parents are coming from a different generation, and then being for us who grew up here or were born here, spent the majority of our time here, it's just a different generation, both age-wise and also culturally in so many other ways. So I think a lot of times there are a lot of clashes, maybe. Our parents saw the world in one way and we saw it a different way. And just like you rightly said, for the millennials, our priorities are different. We're not thinking about building a house back in Nigeria or in our home countries. We're thinking about, settling here, having our families here, our lives here. And some people, of course, if they want to invest back home or travel and flex or whatever back home, they can do that. But it's not like you said, they're not paying or giving someone money back home, or unless they just want to do it. But I think, I think many of us kind of missed out on opportunities to share culture, sitting together with your parents, sitting together with your aunts and uncles, and just talking about, their lives growing up. I think for many of us, we just didn't really, and again, I think it goes back to, parents just not having a lot of time sometimes for their kids, again, because of bills and just other priorities. So many of us kind of grew up with this, understanding or feeling that we don't understand our parents, they don't understand us, we just live very different lives. So I think, we didn't really get an opportunity to really share much about our lives and their lives. But I think now, as we get older, my mom and I talk to her and she tells me stories of her life growing up. So it's a beautiful thing to kind of be able to gain that from her now, now that I'm older and we can kind of connect on a different level. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is this mixing of the older and the new generation. And I think it really does take a certain level of intentionality just to learn more about our history and about our cultural norms and traditions and folklore, like you and I were discussing yesterday, which is something that we don't just have access to easily. And I think many millennials were just not aware of these cultures, I guess, in a way that we could function in a traditional society. I don't think the average African immigrant millennial can go back to their village and function properly. First of all, they'll look very odd, and they can't communicate in the same way. It'll be very obvious that this person has no idea what they're doing. And then with I definitely want to give like a lot of kudos, I guess, to people like Flavor, because I think since 2012 or so, like when I first got introduced to his music, like hearing him sing in Igbo, and like the music was very beautiful, it was very modern, it was very hip. Like he really did a lot. I mean, I would say he's one of the pioneers, I would say, when it comes to encouraging like this new generation of African artists, or well, specifically Igbo artists, to sing in their native tongue and in a way that has a lot of like swag to
That
it, in
is
a way
cool.
that's very cool, very colorful. Like people like look forward to his new releases, and people like Fino as well, and other people who are like who sing in their native tongue, and like in a way like the way Flavor like mixes his music, like you, of course some of it is kind of, you know, on the raunchy side, but a lot of it still is very positive, and you're learning about, you know, the heritage, you're learning about like different slang, like it's just I would give him a lot of credit for that. And like specifically like with the Ege Ege video with Larry Gaga and Teresa Honora and all these other like greats, I guess in Igbo like artistry or whatever, and I think it was beautiful to see that video, because like I was telling you earlier, it showed, like to me, I never knew anything about Ege Ege music or Teresa Honora or anything of that nature. So it kind of introduced the new generation to this older generation kind of culture. And at the same time, for the older generation, it brought them like this connection with the new generation. So I think that's a very beautiful thing. And, you know, as far as the cultural revitalization, I guess, aspect, I don't know if you had anything to say about that.
Yes, I think it was, you know, I mean, with especially the song with Teresa Ononuju, because it has sparked a lot of conversations. I was looking online and I realized that people, I mean, also like we discussed yesterday, people have been having questions, people have been asking questions on, oh, who is this person? Oh, where is she? And then you now see, I just saw that her song is on Spotify.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, so it has, I mean, right before now, it was as if she was forgotten, you know. But that song is relevant in the sense that it kind of brought the old and the new, right? And, you know, like you said, revitalization. So it's like, you know, it has also made people are, you know, especially the millennials, are now asking questions like, okay, what other thing can I find from the past? You know, like bringing stuff from the past back. You know, what else can I find? Okay, so if this lady played this kind of music back then, can I see a video of what happened back then? Oh, was this what she was wearing back then? So it's kind of, but what was the meaning of the thing that I saw in her video back then, and things like that. So it's also raising conversations, you know, making people more curious about things that they didn't know. So there's a whole lot of stuff to be learned about the past, you know, about where we come from, not just the food. I know that everybody is excited about jollof rice and egusi soup and things like that, but yeah, food is a wonderful part of culture. I love food myself, but you know, but certain questions are being asked and answered right now, and people are beginning to talk to their parents more. I have grown nieces that are, you know, and nephews that are asking questions like, okay, why is this way? Oh, during the process of, and I know people who, you know, want to get married, they travel all the way back home to go and do their traditional weddings and stuff, and so they are learning more about the culture. And while they are back home, they're asking questions like, okay, what does this tree mean? What does this plant mean? What does this stand for? And things like that. So a lot of interest have been sparked, you know, with some of the things. Like you said, kudos to people like Flavor, kudos to Fino. I mean, Fino to me is a magician, because I can't even imagine somebody rapping in Igbo and getting the lyrics tight. It's just It's so interesting, to me. And so a lot of these things have sparked maybe so it went and because the songs are so enjoyable, because things are, people are becoming, like I said, they're becoming curious. And when he says something that I hear a lot of my students come into class and say, oh, I was listening to Fino's song the other day and he said, when they fall down, what does that mean? So some of the slangs some of the slangs and things are becoming more and more people are I'm just so happy that people are people are curious. That's the thing. I would say people are curious. And so when I started my business, when I started the Igbo class, I had a lot of people who said, oh, I'm going to register my kids. I was teaching kids. It was like parents were like, and some of the parents were millennials, because I had like 5-year-olds, I had 6-year-olds in my class, and they were like, oh, you have to learn Igbo. You need to learn Igbo. But at a point, I realized that when people found out that I was teaching Igbo, and this, I try to make my, like, as I said earlier, not to toot my own horn, I'm a cool person, so I like to make my classes cool.
Right.
So I was impressed when people started finding out about my classes and actually signing themselves up for the classes. It's such a beautiful thing to watch. You just say, okay, I want to know about this class, I want to learn about this class, and in the class we just kind of have conversations about not just the language, but somehow we also talk about one or two things about the culture, because people ask me questions. There's a group that I'm teaching. They're not Igbos. They are DNA tested Igbos. All right. They're not actually powerful. Yes, DNA tested Igbos, and it's amazing how beautiful these people are, because they are not. Well, I won't say they are not. If they hear that I said they are not Igbos, they might. They might be so mad at me, but these are people that were not born. Their fathers and grandfathers are African Americans, and they decided to say, oh, you know what, we know the whole story and we just want to find out where we're from. And so they go on and do this DNA testing and find out that they are from, I have people who say, oh, I actually found my family, my great grandfather's family in so place in Igbo land, and these people take it a step further. I have classes with them, where we talk about, where we learn Igbo language and we discuss culture, we discuss all kinds of things. They are so amazing because they do namings. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, it is beautiful. And these are adults. These are professionals. These are not kids. These are adults. They've taken. So there's nothing as impressive and as exciting and as beautiful as seeing somebody who decides by themselves to say, okay, you know what, I'm a grown woman, I'm a grown man, I want to know where I come from, and I want to know more about where I come from. And I like the conversation that is going on right now in among Igbos, because a lot of people are trying to find out where they're from, and with all the things, all the things that are being put out there. So, and it has also encouraged a couple of people to put up, put up resources, that talk about Igbo people, that talk about Igbo culture, that talk about the language. There's so many resources that are coming out. I'm working on a couple of resources myself,
Nice.
that we're going to put out there, just for education.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. You definitely brought up a lot of amazing things, and I think, like you said, when people are more intentional about learning more about their heritage, again, using the example of flavor, not only does it inspire a generation like the millennials and other people, it also inspires other people. Whenever I watch Flavor's videos on YouTube, I always see people from different African countries saying, I don't know what they're saying, but I love the Igbo language. I've been learning. So it's a beautiful thing. When you have pride in your culture and in your heritage, it reflects, both within yourself and how you see the world around you, and even how others see you as well. So I think that's a beautiful and a very powerful thing. And
so taking it back to when I said that, loving yourself, accepting yourself, and being confident in yourself, there's nothing cooler than that. Because when you are comfortable, when you are comfortable with yourself, it's easier for somebody to want to know who you are and what you're all about. Confidence actually makes you attractive.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, that's very much true. And I think kind of to touch on that, I guess the topic we mentioned earlier about like this, maybe the traditional or older generation kind of things, like with social media. I mean, social media has been a driver for culture like for a while. Like it's actually been pushing a lot of these um, things that we see every day, like the traditional weddings and like just Nigerian weddings in general, Nigerian food, like language, and then like with some of these like different challenges. Like the other day, I saw like one TikTok video or whatever of a lady dancing to Egu Abuja. Like that was, I think that was my first time hearing that song, and it just like was so catchy. Like, and then she was wearing like a rapper like traditional kind of wear, and had her hair in like a traditional kind of style, and it was just so beautiful like to see that. And then again, even though the music is old, but it's still like something about it is it moves you. And even like seeing people dance, to Ogene music, and do like the traditional Igbo dancing. Like I think it's so beautiful to see like those in our generation like have that desire to, and weirdly like it just kind of comes naturally, because not that anyone taught us how to do some of these dances, but somehow it's like within you, it's in your blood somehow.
Yes.
Like there's no way you can hear Ogene music and kind of sit still.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That's very, very true. That is very, very true. Yeah, because I think the awareness that's been created by all this resources has made it so people are investigating, really. People are investigating. When I moved to when I came to the US, I earlier on, I think I attended a traditional wedding. No, it was a New Year festival thing, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my goodness. What's happening here? And Texas, Houston is the place. Houston is just, some people say, when I tell them I live in Houston, they're like, oh, that's the 37th state of Nigeria, because it feels, like home in Texas. If you're Houston especially, feels like home here. So a lot of people still, when you go to traditional weddings here, you see the people having the traditional wedding, the things they wear, the way they dance, the songs they choose, the food that is served. You know that before they get married, everybody is just taking time to say, oh, what's where Auntie, I want to do. I've had so many people say to me, Auntie, I'm having my traditional wedding next week, and my husband wants to wear this cap or that dress or that fabric. What does it mean? What does it represent? What is it wrong? Is it right? Things like that. And we've had conversation, even ask me things, and even know some things that I don't even know, despite the fact that I grew up back home. It's interesting. Yeah. So I'm just so proud that this is what is going on right now. People are embracing who they are. There's nothing as beautiful as embracing oneself. It is one of the most beautiful things to see, and I'm here for all of it.
Oh yes. Gee, I'm actually happy that you mentioned that, because that was like the next question I was going to ask you. Like when it comes to people, like let's say an example you gave, maybe because we didn't really grow up hearing some of these elements about our culture. So let's say you don't have maybe you don't have much of a support group, or maybe you don't have like a very great relationship with your families back home, so you don't really know how to go about certain things. So I guess let's say let's say a young person makes a mistake, like maybe a woman does something that she's not supposed to do that's somehow considered taboo in our culture, or let's say a young man does something he's not supposed to do, or says a certain thing or whatever that's like traditionally for women only, or something that's traditionally for men only. Like how does a person, I guess, know when they're doing something wrong, or how can they be corrected, I guess, in love maybe, or I don't know. Because I know, when I was talking to you about some of these topics before, like there are certain things that may have been considered taboo in our culture, like like I told you about some women wearing like ishiagu, or but now I'm seeing more people are, I guess, more accepting or tolerating of wearing some of these clothing items online, or when they go to different functions. So what do you think it will take to change some of these traditions, especially those that forbid men and women from doing certain things in Igbo society, and if you could kind of give some examples of maybe some taboo things that you are aware of at the moment.
Well, things are changing quite all right, but I do believe that things that are sacred should remain sacred. In fact, there are rules and culture, there are norms and values that should guide every society, and so, having said that, let me organize my thoughts this way. So first of all, things are changing quite all right. Times are changing, and I mean, who knew that you can actually stay in your house, not set foot outside for a whole month, because you can shop from home, work from home, do everything you want to do this interview from home. At the point, this thing seemed abnormal. I mean, anybody who thought about this a couple of years ago, it would have been impossible. But times have changed. However, things that are sacred I feel like certain things should remain sacred, because some norms and culture and values are put in place to make sure that things work well. Sometimes we may not like it, but it is for the greater good of everyone. But there are some things that are taboos that have changed. I guess some of the things that are changing and some of the relaxed, some of the things that are relaxed are happening because of the globalization. I mean, this is, again, like our fathers and mothers would say, this is the jet age. So things are things are changing. All right. So I think that's why they say traveling is a part of education, because when you're in your own little corner and you're doing certain things, it seems to you like this is the right thing to do. I know that there are some things that are said that, if we don't do this in our culture, but as time goes on, because people are more informed, people are aware of other, how other people are around, how other people, other tribe, other culture, other nationalities, how they do certain things. They begin to see that, okay, this might not just be bad after all. So I think I think technology, social media, globalization gave birth to certain things changing. For example, I know that in the past, in Igbo culture especially, women do not inherit properties, from their father. Like if you're a woman and your father had sons and your father died, you would not get any properties. And let's say he doesn't even have, only the sons get the properties. And let's say he doesn't get properties. Let's say the man didn't have any son. His brothers would take over because he gave birth to women. But now, women are beginning to inherit stuff. Women are starting to inherit stuff, and so things are changing. Because you are beginning to understand that, hey, look, these women are human beings as well. All right, things like Isiago. I remember that before. I mean, in Igbo culture, Isiago is worn by people in the Ozo, people who have the Ozo title. All right, that is their dressing. We have always been known for that kind of dressing. But now you see, even now, women who are getting married. In fact, there was an uproar a couple of years back of a lady who used the Isiago fabric to sew shorts and shirts. Yeah. And and social media blew to pieces. People were infuriated. How dare? What does that mean and all that? But it is just one of those things, because I see that Isiago pattern or design is made in silk now. Before it was a particular type of fabric that was made, but now it's, people said, hey, we can make silk out, or we can use silk and make Isiago, we can use wool and make Isiago, we can make cotton or whatever. And so people are saying, okay, what do you mean? It's no longer, there's no significance, it's just a fabric. It can just be a fabric worn by anyone. I was tempted to, but like I said, I tried to leave sacred things to be to be sacred, So so that's the thing. So a lot of things are changing because people are becoming more aware and understanding that there are certain things that used to happen that basically that some of these laws were made for people and people were not made for these laws. Some of them that were too strict that people are beginning to relax on them, and some might even say that this is why we're losing our culture. Possibly, but I feel like culture, because culture is made for man and man is not made for culture, things keep evolving and things keep changing. People learn that, okay, there are so many ways of doing something, and things can be improved, so a lot of things change from time and again. I know that also in I think the one that hits home, why I use that example is, things are changing, especially with women. When you have so many ideologies out there today, like the feminist ideology, saying why can't women be included in the society? Why can't women have this, and why can't women partake of this and that? And so people are saying, okay, maybe it's not a bad idea if we also include women. So things are changing because people are relating more right now. Before now, people didn't relate like that because, as I said earlier on, if you're in your own little corner in one village and you don't know what the next village or the next city or the next country is doing, you might just think that the way you're doing what you're doing is the best way of doing what you're doing, until you now travel and then you start seeing that, so these people are doing this, and it's not bad. We can also adopt it and also improve and all that, So yeah. Because there are certain times, I know that there are some cultures in the past that if you wanted to marry a woman, they wouldn't take money from you. They will flog you a couple of strokes of the cane. And if you cried, and if you cried, they will say you're weak and can't take care of their daughter and you wouldn't marry. But now things like that are going away because, who says that a man cannot cry?
I know.
Yeah. So.
Well, just to kind of round up, so I know we've talked about so many different things in this, in this conversation. I know there's one thing in particular that I always reflect on, because I know, like I told you before, growing up, my parents really did a good job with trying to, incorporate aspects of our culture as it relates to, New Yam Festival and other cultural events where sometimes we actually had, masquerades that were there. But I don't think I've seen a masquerade in the U.S. since, I don't know what year that was. It was in the early 2000s, the last time that we had one kind of function like that. And I know for many people, obviously because of religion and maybe you can say exposure, maybe you can say education, we tend to see certain aspects of our traditional Igbo culture as evil or backwards. And I wanted to ask you, what do you personally think? How can we change our views on some of these things that, make our culture what it is, while still, upholding our religion, but at the same time respecting or appreciating those parts of our heritage?
Okay, so I think that it's easy. I always say this: it's easy to condemn what you do not know. And that is one of the issues when people face judgment or when people condemn or judge something or someone. It's 80% of the time is because they don't know that thing or they don't know that person or they're afraid that it conflicts with what they are used to. So regarding masquerade, I know at the last UIU convention that we had masquerade there. And it's just to identify with the culture. For some people, it's what they know. It's entertainment. It's entertainment. And so, what I have to say about that is always try to find out. Before you even go ahead to condemn something, try to know what it is. And nothing stops you from being religious and still doing what you have to do. I'm not saying at the end of the day, I'm one who advocates, your conscience or what you feel comfortable with. So, but do not dismiss something because somebody said so. Just investigate and find out how does this, what aspect of your culture, how is this relevant in your culture, basically? What is the relevance of certain practices in your culture? And then if you know, ask questions. And if you find out, then you choose for yourself whether this is something you want to, celebrate or not. Do you understand what I mean? And I'm saying this with regards to things like the masquerade and some other practices, So at the end of the day, it's about knowing, it's about being aware. You just cannot dismiss something and say, oh, this is evil or this is bad or whatever, without giving it a fair chance to know what exactly it's all about. Because I saw a short video yesterday, in fact a couple of videos that have been trending online. Some people say that playing football is a sin, and any Christian who plays football is going to go to hell. Another person said that wearing cologne is a sin. If you wear cologne, you're going to go to hell, and so forth and so on. So you see, you cannot make decisions or choose what you want out of a culture or what you want out of a certain practice based off of what somebody said because of how they feel towards it. I feel like everybody should it's all about knowing. This is a beautiful time to be alive because every information that you need is at your fingertip on your phone. I always tell people there's no reason for you not to know anything, because any single thing you want to know is accessible with the access that you have to information. So investigate, ask questions. Even if some people, I know that some people, when they do not know something, simply because they don't understand it, they make up stuff because they don't want it or because they don't like it. They make up stuff to make you not like the same thing. So, but just ask questions. Go online, research for yourself, and gather as much information as you need to, especially concerning where you come from. It's not a waste. It will empower you, and you will even be a cooler person for knowing. That's what I have to say about that. And then decide for yourself if it aligns with your belief as a person, with your personal belief. And then so that's really what I'd like to say about that.
And thank goodness for YouTube, like everything, like so many videos.
Exactly. Yes.
It's a great way to see like historical things as well as modern conversations and commentary.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Chi, thank you so much for your time. If you can just give some final closing remarks, maybe how people can connect with you or anything that you would like to share as we close.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love to have conversations about Igbo people, culture, language, everything Igbo. And now I'm inspired to resume my Sabi Sunday. to resume my Sabi Sunday, because that actually helps to talk about stuff every now and then. Yes, I've been so busy this past year that it's crazy, but I'm going to get back to it. So thank you everyone who has listened. Thank you to everyone who has listened in. And I am Chinwe Ononuju. I was born and raised in Igbo land, and I am an Igbo language tutor. I tutor Igbo language to people in diaspora. So if you're interested in Igbo language, if you're interested in Igbo culture, just give your girl a shout. I'm on Instagram as Igbo class and as at Igbo class Auntie Chi, and I'm also on Facebook as Igbo Chi. Yes, and just try, as I've said a couple of times, and I cannot overemphasize, nothing is as cooler as being confident in who you are and being confident in where you're from. Do not let anybody tell you that your language, your culture is bush. I hear that a lot. There's nothing bush about your accent. I was talking to somebody a few days ago, and then they said, "Oh, hi, do you speak English?" I said, yes, I do. How about you? How about you? Do you speak English? And she said, of course I do. I said, okay, all right, well. And then she goes on to say, but I can't understand your accent. I said, likewise, I cannot understand your accent as well. So do not there's no language or culture that is more superior to another language or culture. That's one thing you need to get at the back of your mind. Your language, or whoever you are, wherever you come from, as long as you know where you come from, it is beautiful. You need to embrace it. There's nothing as attractive as knowing where you're from and embracing who you are.
Yes.
And so yeah, that's it. Just people keep doing the good work, keep finding out more about yourself, keep having this conversation. That's the only way we can keep our culture and our heritage alive, so yeah, that's basically. And thank you so much, Nkiru, for having me. This is, it's always a pleasure to connect and talk with you. I just like the conversations that we have because they are always very relevant conversation. And so thank you very much for bringing me to this. I hope to come back again.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Chi, and thank you all for listening. This is Conversations from the Diaspora, a Building Africa's Future podcast. Until next time, be well. Bye.
Bye-bye.